Hello and welcome to the Friday wrap up here on Landy's Crypto Corner. Today is November 1st, 2024, and Bitcoin, of course, has closed its October monthly and started its November monthly candle here. And we have seen Bitcoin do something very, very important that we have not seen since November of last year, really. Well, October into November. So let's take a look at this monthly and kind of follow up with where we left off on Wednesday. And we might even have a little bit of fun with Fibonacci levels again. And in this case, last year from September into October, Bitcoin set a beautiful, beautiful monthly low structure, not just on a swing, but also on a close. And now, although we don't have a breakout above the closing highs, we have seen Bitcoin solidify this low at $49,000 as the higher low as it relates to this $25,000 higher low, or just shy of $25,000 in this case at 24.9. And we also have a closing low structure. Now, I've seen some that say like, no, it's got to close above this candle close open at 71,300. It's actually not very accurate. Believe it or not, just closing above that $64,609 would do it, which was the close open from July into August, or anywhere above the prior month's wick high of September at around 66,550, which is what I wanted to see to set a closing low. But I also wanted to see the close open from May into June closed above, and we did get that at around that 67.5. Now, Bitcoin did already meet the criteria to test the all-time high zone. We did see that last week, and a nice little pullback coming into the weekend here. So, this is kind of the criteria, right? So remember last cycle, we had the higher high and the last higher low on a swing and a close was back here from September of 2020. And for those that were around following my analysis back here in 2021, it would have been here around that March into April timeframe where I was calling for a major top. I had mentioned that the last higher low was all the way down here at, just shy of $10,000 on a swing, and on a close open structure at around, just shy of $11,000 at 10,800 or so. And I was not looking for a lower low into a bear market off of this high. I was looking for a higher low into higher high swing structure around that upper second, and then come back and evaluate it if we could not close monthly candles above $64,899 or $65,000. Now, in this case, we saw that the last higher low to pay attention to on monthly closes was 28.8. So when Bitcoin, failed that area and then moved down and tried to set another higher low as it related to this 28.8 higher low, and the close open there at $35,000, we did see it swing into that area and close above, but it failed to actually close that higher low structure on closes above around 41,800. And, I would have wanted to see it close additionally above around $48,000. Even, I believe, 47,990. So we had the 46,200. It would have needed to close above, and it failed to do so, with the close coming in at 45.5. And I would have wanted to see it, and I believe I was saying this at the time, was closes back above $48,000 would set another higher low. And then we'd look for possible consolidation and maybe another breakout to the upside. But other than that, this was going to be the criteria, was breakout above that March 2022 high, which it wasn't looking like on lower term timeframes it was going to do. And that 48,240 was the high that turned into a bear market lower high once we saw this close come in here that closed just below the low structure there in April of that year. Now, one of the things that we got to pay attention to now is the structure here on the monthly. Kind of like what we see back here is we want to make sure, the last higher low was at 24,900. We want to make sure we are marking this $49,000 low. this will be right now until we see either another higher low or a higher high that takes out and then comes down and takes out this higher low, or a different type of a structure. From there, we need to make sure this is marked, because any closes below here, with the way that the October candle closed, would be a structure break. Now, it's not necessarily over. We would have to see a lower high and so on and so forth, but we do want to pay attention to $49,000. So I think personally, if we were to see any kind of price action back down around there, that it would present opportunity rather than risk. But never truly know until price were to get there. Now, in this case, we did get a closure above our upper first standard deviation of the Bollinger Bands. Just as a quick reminder, if you're not familiar with Bollinger Bands, the basis band here is a 20 simple, and then we have 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations to the upside. Typically, we're only looking at the upper second, but I like to use these as confluent levels of interest as it relates to volatility metrics, like BBWP, for determining when we're in a contraction or expansion phase. And you can see that, back here, when we saw Bitcoin put in the October breakout candle that also set the low here at that $25,000 area, we were seeing a contraction because Bitcoin had returned to the mean around the 20 simple moving average. It regained the upper first standard deviation. We were seeing that still get contraction. We were looking for expansion. And we did see the November candle come up and test the upper second. And then the December candle actually get the closure above it that kicked off expansion to the new all-time high. So, if you were following me back in December of 23, we knew that we were going to see somewhere around the all-time high area when ETFs were slated to launch. We already had the date by then, I believe. And of course, we did, we knew that it was going to be somewhere around there in the first quarter, right? And then we did get that launch. We saw that the bear market lower high was tested. It held up. And then, of course, in February and March, we got the new all-time high just prior to the halving. So, we knew that expansion was ready, and it was already beginning its expansion phase. We got the nice pinch in the Bollinger Bands. When we get closures outside of the upper bands, these longer term time frames, the lower bands just expand exponentially to the downside here. We also saw that the 20 simple or the basis band was nice and up and to the right there at about the 2 o'clock position, which is what we want to see for moving averages anyway. Now, I don't typically talk about moving averages, as I am more interested in the zones of interest in terms of horizontal support and resistance. But I do think that we're going to be relying on our bands a little bit more here in the future, as long as Bitcoin is closing above the upper first standard deviation. And we can see that we got a cool down in BBWP, which is the volatility metric that I use with my set of Bollinger Bands. This is a custom set. I just named it Landy Bands because that was funny to me. And it's just, triple Bollinger Band set. You can find it in the link in my profile under the bit.ly link on X, or you can find it in the link in the video description down below on YouTube. It's got a bunch of other stuff like moving averages and super trend and, a bunch of customizable stuff in there, so you can play around with it if you'd like. But I primarily use it for identification of where things are as it relates to the levels of volatility on the Bollinger Bands. Now, what we're waiting for is much like what we saw in prior cycles, right? So we have the compression here. We had the big expansion on the monthly, and then the sideways, and then the compression just before the breakout here. And you see the bands just run off the screen to the downside, lower third, lower second, lower first, kind of dips down. It used to run off the screen, but we had a shallower high up here as it related to prior cycles, right? Volatility has gone down over time on some of the longer term time frames. Now, what we see is once Bitcoin actually starts to crack back above that upper second standard deviation, we even saw this a little bit back here in February. We see that we get that extension up through the upper second and third standard deviation when Bitcoin actually initiates its run. And you'll note that once it did the close back here from October into November of 2020, and it was right on, it closed right on the prior cycle all-time high, that it was already above the upper second and third standard deviation, indicating that the run was going to begin. And then we got subsequently our December, our January, our February, and our March candles before our April, and then sell in May and walk away. But if you didn't sell right when May started, you were probably pretty sad. It was right around that time. Of course, we were looking for higher lows. We got that. And then we got slightly higher highs, but a failed breakout above the actual $65,000 high. And we didn't get above the upper second standard deviation to keep that expansion going to the upside. Instead, we actually got a little bit of a contraction and an expansion to the downside for the first time in Bitcoin's history, which is pretty typical to see as assets mature. In this case, we've seen an initial expansion earlier this year. And we're back in a contraction phase, but in a bullish contraction phase as Bitcoin has gone sideways. So price volatility is cooling down as it relates to the bands. It's also been tight up against the upper first standard deviation. Nice little wicks down towards that basis band. And as long as Bitcoin is closing above the upper first, we will start to see volatility move up a little bit here. And when we do start to see Bitcoin close above the upper second standard deviation, which is right around 82,750 or so, that's when we're going to see volatility expansion really start to solidify to the upside. Again, we'll see highly volatile lower term timeframes again. And in terms of the monthly, we will kick off expansion again to the upside. Now, that zone did update, and it was $80,000 on Friday when I talked to everyone. On Wednesday when I talked to everyone. It is Friday. Now, what something that you do need to understand about this is volatility expansion is going to occur above about $85,000. And the reason why I say that is because if Bitcoin were to move up towards the upper second standard deviation and start getting right up against it, we will see this slightly adjust in candle or in this time frame of the monthly. It won't adjust that heavily, but it will, I would say 83 to 84,000 is probably where it would adjust to. So we'd want to see closures above that to really initiate expansion, and probably do a price replace band up around, at least at minimum, the lower term timeframes up around $100,000, which is where the upper third is now updated to. I would be looking for closes above this. We have an election right around the corner. I will tell you that because we are in a technical contraction phase still right now, I would beware if the crypto unfriendly administration gets into office. We are probably looking at a more muted run up to the upper bands. I maybe some wicks through to the upside above $100,000 if it's going to do it. But just beware of the mid to low $80,000 region to the upside, and the upper third around $100,000 or low $100,000 region. That would actually be indicating to me that this would go back into a contraction phase and start to consolidate again. And yes, it would be higher level consolidation, and we would need to keep a very close eye on that low at $49,000. But I'm going to show you more longer term timeframes. Maybe not today, maybe Monday. I was going to get into it today, but I've already spent a lot of time on this. And what I really want you to understand is that's probably, I would be looking for a muted run, basically. And maybe not the nice big expansion that we get above that upper second and upper third, but a more muted run if it's a crypto unfriendly administration. If it's a crypto friendly administration, I would be looking for closes outside of the upper second and third again to initiate the run like it typically does outside of those top side of the bands. And we're going to have a little bit of fun with fibs here. So we're going to take a look at the prior cycles, bear markets, or bear trends, I should say. Let's go ahead and utilize the index for this actually. And let's go ahead and clear the drawings off here, remove drawings, and just quickly kind of review things a little bit here. So, we don't really have a bear market. This was 2009 higher low into higher high, and then our first real big bear market for the charts here is actually our 2013 to 2015-16 timeframe. Well, technically, yeah, when did it break out? Higher low structure was 2016 here. So, yeah, started to change structure on the monthly around then. If we take a fib and we kind of pull that to the actual lows here, we'll see that in this case on log scale fibs and using log scale charts, we got this big move up with the top put in around the 272 up there. And, a bear market lows, losing that 618, almost coming back to the 1414. But when we start to look into the 2017 high into the 2018 bottom here, and then of course the retest in 2020, when we look at this, we can see that we had a very high volatility environment, and that is also reflected in the way that Bitcoin started its life for charts here. Is it started out with very high volatility, maintained that high volatility, and then went into a cool down through 2014, 2015 on the lows there into 2016 when it started to actually break out and get its full-on expansion to the upside. And then it went back down into contraction phase in its bear markets here, and then a nice deep contraction on higher lows. By the way, that was a nice volatility divergence between those closes there. We see the kickoff of expansion to the upside. We get our all-time high here, which just so happens to come in and around that 1618 level. So we didn't see any closes above that, around that $62,000, kind of closed just slightly below it, with that close coming in at 61,350 there on the highs, where the wick high was at $69,000. Nice little spike back down to that 888. Many of you who've been around watching me and listening to me for a long time recognize that. Thank you to Torque for the 888 call outs all the way back in 2021, prior to us getting to that bear market low. And well, we see that Bitcoin likes the 618 off the bear market low there. This means that our polls for these major fib levels are relevant. So we do have a nice pull from $69,000 down to 15.5 here, where we can look at a few different things. The 1618 is up here at $173,000, by the way. I'm also going to go ahead and throw on the Bollinger Bands so we can see how things are starting to line up with levels of volatility to the upside. Now, I have an extra fib here just above the one spot at the 1.168. This is not a 1.618. It is a 1.168. And this is a relevant level in the deeper $80,000 region that, if Bitcoin were to start pushing up through it, I would find, 80, deeper 80s to $90,000 region is what I'd be looking for. If you watch Wednesday's video where I was kind of talking about some of this stuff, understand that, I'm looking at above, price action around the high 73 to 75 based on the daily band setup. As it relates to, horizontal support and resistance, I'd be looking for the bands above the all-time high, 73 to 75, weekly 75 to 78, and then the monthly here, I was looking around the upper second, so 78 to 80, and then closes above there. We can start targeting deeper 80s to $90,000 region around the 1618, and then of course the 1272 there at just over $100,000 at $103,000 is where the upper third is. If we were going to start seeing closes above there, I'm looking pretty quickly to around $115 to $130 between the 1272 and the 1414. I would refine those levels once we had price action in and around there, especially on any closes on longer term timeframes above $100,000. If it didn't already hit that 1414, we would definitely be calling out some of the major levels in and around there. And then above the 1414, the 1618 is at about 173. So I'd be looking anywhere between there, $150 to $175,000 roughly. And there is some other polls that are relevant for some of those areas like trend fibs and stuff like that I'm not going to get into today. If we were going to go on like a massive parabolic run, kind of like what we saw in the early days, which I doubt, to be quite honest, but we could see, in a Trump pump scenario, maybe we got up to like the 1786 over $200,000, or between the 1618 and the 1786 here. which is at $223,000. Maybe, you're probably going to hear, if we were to hit anywhere around 170 to $175,000 by this 1618, you're going to hear that 175 and above, we're looking at $200,000. That's all you're going to hear as a narrative. And above there would be the 1786. So I would just be cautious if we do see something like that. We're still a ways off, right? We got Bitcoin playing back down to its prior cycle highs right now, at $69,000. And I think that's going to be relevant to talk about pretty soon. Another thing that I wanted to note here is that the actual basis band is just below our swing low here. And that's really good news for you bulls. I wouldn't want to see it tested again, especially without making some sort of a higher high structure here. But what I will tell you is that that's a good thing. We want to see the basis band above the last higher low. That starts to give us a little bit more confidence in price when it's hanging around these areas. And it will be above that if we start seeing closes above 73,835 there at the prior all-time high. So I would be looking for that soon, and for expansion to the upside. You might be saying, but Bitcoin just sold off like $4,000 and it had a $2,500 candle down and it's all over, right? Well, look, we confirmed the higher low on the monthly. I'm not going to hate on that structure. We're still in the context of a compression within price right now. So when this kicks off back to the upside on closes above the upper second, mid $80,000 region, mid to low $80,000 region, we're looking at price, moving violently to the upside, in my opinion, at minimum to price replace band at around $100,000. This has also turned the stochastic momentum indicator back to the upside here. 65,600 is going to be the number to maintain on monthly closures going forward, to keep that turn to the upside. Now, when looking at the weekly as we head into the weekend, I will tell you that I would like to see Bitcoin follow through and get a close above the 69.5 region, where it's just kind of moving back above in the early goings of the Saturday candle. I want to see continuation on the weekly, and I'll be honest, this is an ugly candle, but first pass rejection when you have a range on the bands like this is not anything too crazy. But I want to see closes for the weekly above 69.5. That would give me confidence that at minimum we'd be likely to test somewhere around the high side structure again, above $70,000. And of course, any closes back above the upper second would start to really kick off expansion to the upside back towards the highs where we have already seen our test and our criteria met. Of course, now we need to see continuation above the most recent high at 73.5 or 73,581 in this case. And of course, that's 73,831 on spot price. It's a little bit lower here at 73,757 on index. But above there, I would be looking for expansion to kick off. We are seeing the price volatility is picking up. So that does mean that on the weekly, as we see increasing volatility, that means it's getting more volatile on the daily as well. So I want to see closures on the weekly maintain above the 65,153. If we do see any closures below on the weekly, that would indicate that not only is this a swing high up here, but that this is a closing high, and we have to keep a very close eye on the basis band and this last higher low close at 62,800, and of course that wick into 58.8. Here it's almost 58.9 on index, so nothing too crazy yet. It's not ready to pop just yet. Of course, we have the elections right around the corner, so it is going to be kind of I think a holding pattern until we see what the outcome is going to be, and I don't know how long it's going to take for that outcome. Now 67,640 is going to be the momentum pivot. Momentum is nice and pointed to the upside. I'd like to see a stronger signal on expansion, so we may get that. We are going to likely get that signal on any closes back above the upper first here. So $67,000 is where the upper first is. And, that would still look good, even though the candle structure is absolutely atrocious right now. with with two hammers, a regular hammer, a bear hammer next to an inverted bull hammer. Not the best look for your bulls, but obviously we were looking for pullbacks in this area. We'll see how things go over the weekend. Let's look at the daily. Let's throw on our normal, not that one, that's for Caspa. Let's go ahead and get back to our Coinbase chart here. And let's throw on our accumulation distribution zones. Nope. Let's do that. Yeah, there we go. All right. So from the daily perspective, we've kind of, already talked about this scenario. I'd mentioned on Wednesday, pullbacks to $68,000 to $70,000 are perfectly fine. Any closes below, around 68 to 68.3, which is the bottom side of the run the highs zone here. And I would be looking for moves back down to the 67 low to 67,300 region, right around the top side of the pivot zone. Just below there is the lower first. When we do have an expansion to the upside and the basis band is lost, keep an eye on wherever the lower first comes in, because if that's lost, it's probably going to test down to wherever the lower second is, which, unless Bitcoin kind of nukes through these levels in the Saturday candle, I'd be looking for Sunday, the lower first to be around this 67 to 67, 200, 300 region. And I would be looking for the lower second to be right there at the pivot zone at 65 and a half. This is currently right at $65,000. So we are getting that expansion into a compression. This is mean reversion back to the basis. And the basis band, of course, is right there at around 68, 400 to 500, depending on your exchange that you're looking at this from. It's at 68, 462. So just above that 68, 3 run the highs zone above here. And of course, that's the lower high structure over here. Just prior to, this is the first lower high of the second downtrend. So, and then the pivot zone is the first lower high of the first downtrend. So we do want to see these areas maintained on closures for the daily, and quick moves back to the basis or even slightly below it to retest. Not too crazy. I would be a little cautious if we start seeing, below $67,000, because the higher low close open, or I guess it is like kind of a little bit of a lower low with a higher low swing. But, that area around 66 and a half right here, I don't want to see that failing, because then it's likely that we're going to see $65,000 get tested. And I'll be honest with you, starts closing anywhere below there, it's expansion back into the recover zone, and we're going to be waiting for a while if we're bullish. Bears definitely want to see that area retested, because bears are just bulls in disguise. They want cheaper prices for a reason, right? There is a limited quantity of Bitcoin that will ever be in existence. Oh my God, it's Friday. Give me a break, right? I should give myself a break. And I'm going to do that. So let's look at a few more things here on the daily. Yep, expansion confirmed. Nice low volatility here. I think that as long as Bitcoin, I should call it the upside. If Bitcoin can get back above the upper first, which is lining up perfectly with our 70,000, the 70,200 topside resistance over here, I would look for expansion right back to the high side structure, anywhere between 70 and 72 essentially. Above there and the upper second, I'd be looking for expansion back to the highs and higher. So back to the highs, meaning on a close, somewhere around 72, 700, 800, almost $73,000. And then I'd be looking for expansion to the highs and higher, where the upper third is at that 73,835 all-time high. So, a first pass rejection and then a sell-off coming into that while earnings were going on and being reported at the end of the month, and options expiring, and a 2-month closure, which I'll talk a little bit about on Monday. This is not unexpected, and don't be scared of price when it goes down. You got to look at the zones of interest and define what would be an opportunity for you and your setup, whether you're long-term investor or you're a trader. So last thing that I'll take a look at here is we did have a bit of a momentum divergence between this high and this high. I think we did get our bear div, or did we avoid it? Did we avoid it? In trend bearish divergence avoided. Good job, bulls. So yeah, that worked out well for you, but you did get a little slight momentum divergence. That was, the initial target's kind of already been met around the basis band. And the current support level, 72,761, would turn this back to the upside. It's approaching the, this is a regular Stochh, by the way, if you're new, not a Stochh RSI. We already have RSI that I just looked at. I don't need a momentum indicator based on RSI as it is one. We have a regular Stochh, which is close over close price action here. And it's right at the edge of the bearish control or bullish control zone here, not bearish control zone. And 72,680 is going to turn that back to the upside. So essentially, we need to see Bitcoin closing candles from here back in the green zone here. Other than that, actually, that's above the upper second here, which would be expansion to the upside. That doesn't need to happen over the weekend. Little steps, sideways consolidation right now, as long as it's above around $68,000, it's fine. I'd be looking for it to go sideways and eventually back up. If it does get below $68,000, I would look for it to head down, anywhere between 65 and a half at the bottom side of the pivot to that 67 to 67, 2 to 300 area. That would be the main area of interest below the $68,000 level. All right, you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, and evening, no matter where you are in the world. Please trade safe. And of course, as always, stay safe. You have a wonderful weekend. And with all of that said, Landy out. Take care.